Everybody hear me? My name is Andre L'Esperance with the Evangelical Catholic, and I'm pleased to introduce this lunch with DeSales Media and my friend Dave Plisky here. Dave and I met a couple months ago at the Alpha Conference in Chicago and had a really good time just connecting personally and professionally. Great guy, and I will read you his bio here, which is quite impressive. As the Director of Product and Innovation and head of DeSales Tech, Dave Plisky is focused on modernizing the church. His software and services team approaches this through products and services that together create a communications hub for dioceses, parishes, schools, and ministries. Through special projects like the study on intentional disciples, Dave helps DeSales use the contemporary gifts the Holy Spirit has given us to drive Catholics to put their faith in action. Dave has spent over 15 years in marketing and product and innovation across industries in Los Angeles, New York, and Prague. He graduated from the Eisenberg School of Management at the University of Massachusetts Amherst with a degree in business and is an alumnus of Seth Godin's Alt MBA. He and his wife Susie are parishioners at St. Aloysius Gonzaga in the Diocese of Bridgeport. Please welcome Dave Plisky.
Thank you, Andre. Thank you so much. And thank you to Jason for making it basically seem like you're damned if you're not in here right now. So appreciate you turning up. Hopefully this meets expectations. So yeah, you are in the right place. By the way, someone told me that my picture on the flyer doesn't look like me anymore, and that's kind of true. So you are in the right place. This is the talk on these unmet needs from a report that we released last year. So I wanted to start by talking about my sister. We're 6.5 years apart. She's younger than me, and we have not been particularly close throughout our lives. We live on different coasts. I'm from California originally, so she still lives there, and we don't see each other too often, maybe once or twice a year. Communication is pretty much surface level all the time. If we're quoting the movies that we grew up watching together, all good. But as soon as it goes any deeper than that, she'll pull back and end the conversation. And it really sucks for me. I wish we were closer. She's the only person that really understands my childhood from the inside out. She was there. And as far as I know, my sister has identified as an atheist since high school. Last year, I finally had enough courage to ask her about her faith life. And she told me, you know how some people are spiritual but not religious? I'm not spiritual or religious, is what she said. And I didn't know what to say. I'm here to talk to you about a study DeSales has done on intentional discipleship, about what it takes to be a Catholic disciple of Christ. It's important that we understand what makes a disciple in today's world, and it's important that we understand and respond to their needs. But let me first talk about the ministry that I work for, DeSales Media. Our mission is to use all forms of communication, media, and technology to lead Catholics to a deeper faith in Jesus Christ, to inspire and generate greater attendance, support, and interaction in parishes, schools, and organizations in the Diocese of Brooklyn and other dioceses, regionally, nationally, and globally. We do that in a number of ways. We are at once a media holding company, a full services agency, and a technology provider. Essentially, we're the communications and technology arm of the Diocese of Brooklyn and beyond. And that work is divided into 5 divisions: tech, studios, services, news, and education. In news, so another Jason, there's a lot of Jasons at this conference. Jason from OSV on Monday, some of you guys were here early for that one, was talking about how OSV got their start in I believe 1912, and mentioned that this was before most of the diocesan newspapers and so forth, a lot of which have folded by now. We're proud to still have the tablet in print weekly since 1908. It's getting pretty old. We also do a Spanish monthly newspaper called Nuestra Voz. Both of those are online daily. And we have a nightly newscast on our television station, Net TV, called Currents News. That's probably a good segue into our studios aspect. So not only do we run a 24/7 linear television station in the greater New York area and online streaming, We also do original programming for that television station and beyond. One of the notable projects recently was called The Chair, where we went around to 85 different dioceses around the country, interviewing the local bishop and having them talk about Catholicism in America from their perspective, past, present, and future. Pretty cool project. Please do check it out at thechair.com if you're interested. From an education standpoint, there we go. The clicker wasn't working for a second. We have an area of the company that provides grants to the schools in the Diocese of Brooklyn and beyond to make sure that they're technologically very modern and up to date and basically competitive with the best private schools in the area. And that allowed us during COVID to be the only part of New York's education system that didn't close down during COVID, because not only were the students equipped with the technology they needed to keep going, but also the teachers and the principals received the training they need to make sure it actually works. From a services standpoint, we provide marketing services and so forth to the different offices and agencies of the diocese and beyond. So our customers, our clients basically are the Office of Schools, the Office of Vocations, the Seminary, the Office of Faith Formation, and we provide things like marketing campaigns and video production and press and media relations and things like that. And finally, the technology aspect is sort of my area. We see technology, first of all, I want to say this, we see it as something that comes up beside the ministry work, that these are tools that can empower those of us who see that there's a better way. So earlier in my introduction, Andre was mentioning this communications hub that we have a vision for. And what that consists of is, not just the tools that parishes need, like having a good website and email tools and giving solutions and things like that, but also a way to actually draw people in by showing them, inviting them into ministries and so forth like that. And that's great, but that's, in business we call that B2B type of stuff, business to business, where we're kind of serving the institutional church. And while we've served it and will continue to do so for the last year or so, or more actually, we've genuinely transitioned to become a ministry that is dedicated to the individuals that comprise the church, a ministry who is serving on the front lines of forming them into intentional disciples, utilizing the areas and tools that I described. So our challenge then is, how can we reach Catholics directly and deeply? So in business talk, that means how should we go from merely business to business in the tech world to business to consumer, B2C? There's something else that you should probably know about me. He mentioned that I've been doing marketing my whole career. So I actually started at DeSales as the director of marketing and digital. So let's talk about marketing for a minute. Here are some experiences that I've had working in the church as a marketer. One, that marketing seems to be a bad word to people, that it's only about promotion, which means ads, which are just interruptions to the thing that you're really trying to watch or read or listen to, and that marketers are really just trying to get you in touch with snake oil salesmen that want to buy you they want you to buy something you don't need. And second, that nonprofit church organizations are ministries, not businesses, that these terms are mutually exclusive somehow. And that the Holy Spirit is what we put our trust in, not data. So let me respond. First of all, what do we mean by marketing? Companies exist to render goods and services. Those goods and services need an audience. Sometimes the audience knows what it wants, and sometimes it doesn't yet. In the words of marketing guru Seth Godin, quote, "Marketing is the generous act of helping someone solve a problem, their problem. Marketing helps others become who they seek to become." Marketing helps others become who they seek to become, end quote. Marketers make change happen. We make a believer out of a non-believer. We do this by delivering on a promise. Great marketers fundamentally change the people they serve. And that's really hard. Great marketing is really hard. And I would argue that Jesus was a great marketer. In fact, marketing is the business term that we've applied to what Jesus taught us about how to bring people along on the journey, which we call evangelization. What do we mean when we use the term evangelization? I think it's a term that gets tossed around a lot these days, even here. and it's probably worth defining. The USCCB, paraphrasing Pope Paul VI, says, evangelizing means bringing the good news of Jesus into every human situation and seeking to convert individuals and society by the divine power of the gospel itself. So I'm just going to say it. Evangelization is marketing. So there's my rebuttal to point number one, and no one seems to have a problem with evangelization. Now, regarding the other two, I would argue that nonprofit church organizations are both ministries and businesses. You have to have the money to be able to do this good work that they're doing. And sometimes they raise money through donations, and sometimes they get it by successfully selling whatever products or services they offer. And third, the ability to collect and analyze data is a gift from the Holy Spirit. I would say that we might call it the 21st century version of knowledge, which can guide us towards understanding and wisdom, all good gifts of the Spirit. So hopefully you at least believe me that marketing isn't a dirty word, because I'd like to go a little deeper. This is one of the most basic principles in marketing. It's called the marketing funnel. It's a conceptual tool that companies use to understand how to drive customers to buy their products. Outside the funnel is everyone in the world. Some percentage of the world is a company's prospects, prospective customers. There are activities that the brand will undertake to move individuals down through the funnel. So these stages are expressed from the perspective of the customer. The top layer of the funnel is called awareness. So the first step is to make some people aware of the brand or product. Not everyone will take notice, but those who do are now prospects at the top of the funnel. Next is consideration. In this step, the company must educate the prospects about the brand or product. Some will ignore the message, but others will listen, and they move on down the funnel. Since only a percentage take the next step each time, the narrowing funnel helps illustrate that there are fewer and fewer people as they move down toward the goal. Now we've reached the conversion stage of the funnel. Here's where the company finally asks the prospect to become a customer by purchasing the product. But it doesn't end there. Now that there's a relationship between the customer and the brand, the hope is for repeat business. This is why we have loyalty programs. If the company is successful, some percentage of customers will become loyal customers or even lifelong customers. But the real prize? To serve someone so well that they love the product, to the point that they go out of their way to talk about it. Think about like a biker guy with the Harley Davidson logo tattooed on his arm, or that sneakerhead that just can't wait to get the next pair of Jordans. This is the final stage of the funnel called brand advocacy. When brand advocates talk about the product, which is free promotion for the brand, they raise awareness and bring others into the top of the funnel and down through it. And what does that sound like? I think it sounds a lot like missionary discipleship. Brand advocates are missionary disciples. In her book, Forming Intentional Disciples, which I'm sure many of you have read, Sherry Weddell named the stages of conversion: initial trust, spiritual curiosity, spiritual openness, spiritual seeking, and intentional discipleship. This is the decision, she wrote, quote, to drop one's nets, to make a conscious commitment to follow Jesus in the midst of his church as an obedient disciple, and to reorder one's life accordingly, end quote. And what do these people do? Well, they do all kinds of things, but importantly, they go out on mission, fulfilling the great commission to make disciples of all nations, which means that they share their faith, bringing people into the top of the funnel and down through it, into deeper relationship with one another and with the Lord. And yes, marketers really do call it conversion, even when we're not talking about discipleship. That means that evangelization primarily happens when those so on fire for the Lord can't help but share the joy of the gospel. And that means that this is our target audience segment. And the questions that we asked ourselves are, how do we identify intentional disciples, and what are their unmet needs? So we designed a research study. We're not a research firm. I told you about all the stuff we do. That's not one of them. So we partnered with a Catholic consumer insights firm called Vineyard Research. And this study was designed to do two things: for us to figure out what the faith journey of intentional disciples is like and identify their unmet needs. And so I'd like to take you now and kind of unpack these findings with you. And if you feel like this is a familiar looking slide, that's because you've got a printed version of it in your bag, in your conference bag. So let's start with faith life. 3 in 4 respondents attended Mass more than the month's weekly obligations. So what we're looking at here is, most people get an extra Mass in per month, many of them even more. And by the way, this mentions online observance as well as physical, because this data was collected basically between May and December of 2021, when COVID was very much still a thing in a lot of places, and people couldn't get to Mass physically everywhere. But still, 97% of these devout Catholics were attending Mass physically. In terms of prayer, almost everyone, 69% were pray every day, and the mean average was over 6 days a week, so almost every day. And in terms of how much time they spent in prayer, the mean average was an hour and 19 minutes, so quite a bit of prayer. Now this one's interesting to me. And we asked, would you describe your faith journey as more of a long, gradual path or one with significant breakthrough moments? And what we found was only 5% reported that it really just consists of significant breakthrough moments. That 27% said it was a long, gradual path, and a full 68%, over 2/3, said it was a mix of both. I found this particularly heartening because, I don't know, you see these movies, or, you know, for example, I have a priest friend of mine who was really into heavy metal before his kind of conversion experience, and you know, I guess he was like an owner of, you know, restaurants and stuff like that. And he has a near-death experience. He's clinically dead, and when he sees beyond the veil, and he sees his family in heaven, kind of waving to him and inviting him. And then he wakes up. He comes back to life, and he changes his life. He drops his nets, and he became a priest. And that's cool. And I do feel inspired when I hear that story. But another part of me feels like, man, I didn't have that experience, and maybe I never will. Does that mean that I'm not called in the same way? And the answer is no. We are all called, but it doesn't always happen like that. So I just feel encouraged when I see that, you know, I'm not alone in not having that type of huge breakthrough moment type of thing. In terms of identity as a Catholic, so we asked, how close to the center of your life is your Catholic faith? Nearly 3/4 said that it's the center of who they are. Another quarter said it's a key part of who they are. And few said it's one of many parts of who they are. In terms of the top three, so we asked, which of the following aspects of Catholicism do you most closely identify with? And I think for a room of priests and deacons, this is particularly nice to see that number one was prayer, followed by the sacramental life, and then followed by liturgy. So at least for the devout Catholics among us, you are doing very, very necessary work. And in terms of what has the most meaningful impact on our faith lives, we heard that prayer was at the top of the, it's kind of the same sort of things, sacraments, clergy and religious directly, followed by print and digital media, Bible studies, and then small groups and ministries. So drilling down into meaningful prayer as a meaningful impact, far and away the rosary was number one, not surprising. What I did find surprising was that the Divine Mercy Chaplet and personal prayer were tied at number 2 at just 19%. I expected more personal prayer from this group personally. And in terms of sacraments, and we'll get into demographics at the end, but 70% of respondents were married, but only 9% report that marriage is a meaningful sacrament to them. The Eucharist, far and away, at 81%, followed by reconciliation at 41%. Now this next part, I'm going to go into, I'll explain kind of on the next slide. It's a kind of a busier set of slides, so I'll walk you through it. But we basically wanted to find out from respondents, you know, we basically try to break down the faith into all these different aspects in order to kind of drill into each one. So there's, I think, ended up being 27 different aspects that we kind of identified, and we asked them, where are your strengths and where's there room for growth? And we kind of divide them into these 5 categories: discipleship, sacramental life, interior fruits, and expressive fruits. So here we go. So the first one is discipleship. What we have here on the left are these 4 areas that fall under discipleship, and this includes actively witnessing and sharing my faith with others, putting the concerns of others first, being part of a community of believers, and being an intentional follower of Christ. Now, we asked all these questions. The first time through, we asked, report your level of strength in each of these areas. And the four options were none, which meaning not an area of strength, little, meaning I am doing okay in this area, medium, meaning this is an area of strength, and high, this is an area of great strength. And then we asked all these questions again, but this time asking, where is your need for growth? None being, I do not need growth here. Little meaning, I need a little bit of growth. Medium, I need a moderate amount of growth. And high, I need a great deal of growth. And here's what we found. So anytime you see these red kind of boxes, what we're basically showing is that there's statistical significance that these answers are kind of apart from some of the others in the same area. So what this helps us do is to kind of raise those with not as high levels of strength and higher needs for growth to the top. So within discipleship, actively witnessing and sharing my faith with others was the lowest level of strength with the highest need for growth. Among the interior fruits, humility is at the top. So only 16% report no level of strength, but combined with little level of strength, none and little level of strength is a full 71%. So nearly 3/4 really don't have very much strength at all in humility, but at least at least a fifth. I know it's kind of funny, kind of not, right? At least a fifth do admit, at least to themselves, that there's a need for growth here in this area. In terms of the interior life, going on retreat was pitiful. 56% report no level of strength on going on retreat. I kind of translate as I don't go on retreat. And that becomes 80% if combined with none and little level of strength. Yet, thankfully, there's an acknowledgement of a high need for growth here. 30% say that they have a high need for growth. 56% if you combine with medium or high level of growth. In the sacramental life, regularly going to confession was by far the problem area. 23% report no level of strength in going to confession, and if you combine with little level of strength, we get up to 57% struggling with confession, and only 18% recognizing a high need for growth in that area. And then finally, among the expressive fruits, performing the spiritual and corporal works of mercy were the greatest areas where we lack strength but need growth. So now we kind of plotted these same ideas on some charts just to kind of really show. So what we're seeing here, and you can barely see the cross hashes, but the y-axis is where the current strength is none or low, and the x-axis is need for growth is medium or high. So what we're basically finding is like this top right quadrant here is going to be like the area where we really need to focus on. This is the problem spots. So just across these high-level categories, expressive fruits, which were those spiritual and corporal works of mercy that we just saw, were the biggest need. But let's drill in. So here's every item on the list. Going on retreat was actually the biggest outlier, having the most need, followed by humility, like we talked about, those works of mercy and so forth. So going into discipleship specifically, actively witnessing and sharing my faith with others was the place that had the most opportunity for growth. And we're going to talk about evangelization next. In the interior fruits, humility and avoiding near occasions of sin top the list here of where we could use the most help. In the interior life, going on retreat and then sacrifice, that we defined as taking up my cross, were the areas we needed the most help. In the sacramental life, as you can see, confession, regularly going to confession far and away tops worship or receiving Eucharist at Holy Mass. And among the expressive fruits, like I said, really everything but giving found its way into that quadrant of needing the help. So performing corporal works of mercy, spiritual works of mercy, and detachment and generosity. We also asked, what do you use how do we phrase this? What are the following do you use as aids in living out your faith? And on the physical side, we found the Bible, of course, topping the list, along with other spiritual books and prayer books. On the digital side, podcasts actually topped the list, followed by faith websites. But what was really interesting to me about this is that only 7% said that they only use physical aids, and only 6% said they only use digital aids. That's 13%. That means that a full 87% use both. And I didn't expect this. I thought that I thought it would kind of break down along a generational divide. And again, I'll show you the demographics information toward the end, but I just thought that older folks would prefer physical stuff and younger folks would do digital, but most people use both. We also asked, how do we phrase this one? To what extent does your faith in Christ purposefully impact your decision-making in your interior life, your family life, your work life, and your social life? And thankfully, it either has a considerable or full impact on all of these for most respondents, but it is most so among the interior life. It's like what I'm saying is it's got the biggest impact on our interior life, second most family, third work, and finally social. So to recap on this section in faith life, 1, we learned that prayer and the sacraments are key to the development of the faithful, also important are print and digital media. 2, that Catholics express a desire to grow in a number of key and wide-ranging areas, which include witnessing to the faith, humility, sacrifice, expressions of the faith, and increasing frequency of confession and attending retreats. And 3rd, while physical books remain important, digital tools such as podcast websites and apps play a significant role in helping Catholics live out their faith. Okay, next section, evangelization. Whoops, got to double click. Let me go back. Okay. So starting off with the comfort level of faith sharing. So how comfortable are you in talking about your faith with others? 82% report that they're at least slightly comfortable talking about their faith with others. 18% said that they're uncomfortable, either slightly, somewhat, or extremely uncomfortable talking about their faith with others. This doesn't sound like a terrible stat until you think about these are the most devout Catholics that we're talking about here. So if even devout Catholics are finding it tough, when they think about sharing their faith and find it uncomfortable, what does that kind of say about the rest of the church? And we can see that here. So it's one thing to be comfortable. It's another thing to actually be proactive in sharing your faith. So when we asked how proactive you are in bringing up your faith with others, only 52% said that they're moderately or extremely proactive in doing so. So what are the barriers? We wanted to know, why is this happening? Number 1, situational appropriateness. Number 2, lack of confidence. Number 3, lack of knowing how to start conversations. Number 4, not wanting to offend. And finally, lack of experience. So kind of wide-ranging set of issues across the board that need to be addressed. Thankfully, 76% said that they're moderately or extremely interested in developing evangelization skills. So they're at least recognizing that there's a need here. When we asked about what kind of formation formats would be most appealing to address this, really pretty across the board, not committal answer, except that they don't want an interactive online forum or community. So I guess we're sick of those. So to recap, while many express comfort in sharing their faith, there is a mix of level of proactivity in sharing the faith. 2, that there's a great need for education and resources to help with evangelization, particularly in the areas of confidence, knowing how to engage in discussion, and how to do so in today's culture. And thankfully, we're at the Evangelical Catholic Conference where we can learn a lot of those things and engage with them and other ministries like them to get that kind of work done in the parish. And 3rd, there's a great deal of interest in further developing these evangelization skills like we just talked about. Next up, spiritual direction. So, this one was kind of surprising. Only 20% report that they're currently receiving spiritual direction, and only 53% have any experience with spiritual direction. So that's a full 48% who have never received it. When asked, is spiritual direction available in your home parish? 40% said it was, 19% said it wasn't, and I think the most concerning stat, 41% said, I don't know. So we asked them, for those who are not receiving, why not? So up here, we can see 61% said that 61% of those who have not received spiritual direction ever said that they don't know how to find someone for spiritual direction. And honestly, I'm not that surprised, because I was looking for a spiritual director for the better part of a year before I finally found one. And when I first started, I had no idea even how to look. It was pretty mystifying. It was one of those moments, too, where the Holy Spirit was clearly pushing me in that direction, where I just keep getting hit over the head with conversations and books that I'm reading. And finally, actually, it was in the middle, it was at the end of a confession. The priest kind of turned to me afterwards and was like, "You need a spiritual director." And I said, "Are you offering?" And he's like, "Come back to me if you can't find one," which is kind of the problem, There's that, like, among those who really do know about it, there's a supply and demand issue, I think. And then, by the way, a third of those who have not received it said that they do not really understand spiritual direction. That was the number 2 reason. So, okay, that makes sense. But what was really wild to me is that of those who have received spiritual direction in the past, still 41% said, "I don't know how to find someone for spiritual direction." You already have found someone for spiritual direction before. What happened? So something's going on there. We asked them, what about online spiritual direction? So I told you I finally did find a spiritual director. We have a great relationship. I did not expect for this person to not be someone that I meet with in person. But it turns out the person I was put in touch with lives in Indiana, and I live in Connecticut, and Zoom is what we do, and it works really well. So we asked about online spiritual direction and what the interest level was, and it was kind of pretty standard across the board, except that I would say those who have never received spiritual direction were more likely to be interested in online spiritual direction. So maybe because they have nothing to compare to, but honestly, I gotta say it totally does work for me. Next up, community involvement. So we asked, are you involved in any types of social or community groups for any of the following categories? Faith, by far, was the number 1 social or community group that they were involved in, followed by professional, education, hobby, sports and fitness. Actually, none was the second most popular answer, and the number 1 reason, if they weren't involved in any, was that they have no time. Second being COVID. Hopefully that's not much of an excuse anymore. When we asked how frequently do they meet, only sports and fitness groups meet more often than faith, followed by health and support and education. But even though sports and fitness meet more, devout Catholics look forward to participating in their faith groups the most, followed by sports and fitness, other groups, hobby, and parenting and family groups. Whoa. Then when we asked, what are the best features of these group gatherings? And across the board, across every area, we basically heard that community and fellowship is the leading feature. When we asked about involvement in faith communities, so we drilled down into the faith communities answer. Number 1 was the Bible study. Number 2, close behind, was education and faith formation, followed by prayer group, service and outreach, and men's or women's groups. When we asked about the format, so in-person, online, or a hybrid, in-person was far and away the most popular, followed by online, and finally a mix of both. When we asked about what interest do they have in continuing to grow their faith through these groups, it kind of was the same order that we saw that they're already involved in. So Bible study tops the list, followed by education and faith formation, and prayer group. These are where there's interest in being a part of a community, a faith community. And finally, we asked, how interested are you in connecting with others who share your faith beliefs in the following locations? And we went from locally to diocesan, regionally, nationally, and finally internationally. And basically what we found is the more global, the less interested. So these people are most interested in meeting with others, maybe unsurprisingly, meeting with others that they can meet in person in their own communities. And finally, I mentioned demographics. I just want to kind of say first just a little bit of how we actually were able to achieve doing this study. It was a pretty sweeping study, and what enabled us to do it was the partnership of so many great organizations that allowed us to reach their people, their lists, many of which are filled with intentional disciples, and send them this survey. So thank you to all these organizations. It also impacted the results. So, for example, way more females responded to our survey than men. So it was almost 3/4 women. The age, so we broke down age by generation here, and it's almost a standard bell curve, so more even distribution there. In terms of race and ethnicity, overwhelmingly white in response, so 83%. So that definitely has something to do with it. 9% Hispanic, and everything else. After that, I mentioned that there's 70% of people were married with all varying levels of numbers of children. 63% live in suburban areas, 20% rural, 18% urban. Household income was kind of across the board, a mix. Political ideology, heavily, definitely right-leaning, 70% either lean right, moderately right, or identify as heavily right. And in terms of employment status in industry, 61% are employed, 9% retired or disabled, 30% unemployed. I think that number is, honestly, I think some people who are retired didn't see that that was an option. I don't think it's that high. But what was really interesting here is that nonprofit or religious work is 25% of this population, which is, I mean, that's way higher than the average nationally. Just to kind of wrap up here, key takeaways. I know that was a lot. Let me just go over some of the kind of the big points that I wanted to remind you of. So, in terms of like this profile of this person, all go to Mass at least weekly. More than 2/3 of respondents pray every day. All identify as people for whom their Catholic faith is close to the center of their lives and for whom faith has had an impact on their family, social, and interior life and continues to do so. Nearly 1 in 5 are uncomfortable talking about their faith with others, and only 52% are moderately or extremely proactive in sharing their faith with others. And in terms of, why is that? The barriers to evangelization: lack of experience, lack of confidence, not wanting to offend others, situational appropriateness, and lack of knowing how to start conversations. Thankfully, more than 3/4 are interested in developing their evangelization skills. Almost all respondents use both physical and digital aids in living out their faith. Nearly half have never received spiritual direction, and only 20% are currently doing so, and more than half do not go on retreat, but that same number admit to a need for growth in that area of their spiritual lives. I think it's important to remember in all this that the response we heard specifically was from very devout Catholics, and that's a pretty small percentage of the population, or maybe extremely small. So, for example, if you're trying to organize a retreat, if you're going to use this data and you're thinking about organizing a retreat for your parish, and the intention was to get these devout Catholics involved, don't be surprised if turnout is low, because when you cater to a small audience segment, expect a small audience. I just think that's important to say. So, like I said, a physical copy of this report is included in the conference gift bag. You can also download the report online. It's at desalesmedia.org/discipleship, which I think in the conference program book there's a QR code if that's easier. I'd also like to just mention that we're not finished yet analyzing the data. This report is really just round one. We've been working with Vineyard Research for a few months now on 2 more things that we want to do with this data set. One is to explore what they call cross-tabulations, which is where we compare answers to check for further nuance. So, for example, we know that only 20% are receiving spiritual direction, but which 20%? Does that meaningfully break down among those who pray the most, or those who attend Mass the most, or even those by some demographic, such as age? And 2, we want to identify if there are particular profiles that we can tease out of the data. Can we understand if there are innovators among this group more willing to try things? Or perhaps can we try to point to where a respondent is along the funnel and learn what really differentiates intentional disciples from those not quite there yet in their discipleship, and thereby learn what we can do to meaningfully bring a disciple further along in their journey? So, action steps. So what? I'm about to tell you what to do with this information, but let me first say I'm not perfect at this stuff. I don't even think I'm really that good at this stuff. I've been in situations with friends of mine who are atheists, and the subject of their doubt of God's existence comes up, and I'll go down the apologetics route instead of just listening. And I don't think it's what Christ would have done, but I didn't know any better at the time. So, and also, I should probably close with about my sister. It remains a mystery what exactly I'm supposed to do. I continue to try. I don't know if you guys are familiar with, there's a video animator a Catholic video animator out of Pennsylvania who goes by the name of I Am Beggar on social media. He kind of appeals to those who have maybe lost their faith or never had it. And I sent her a video that I thought she would enjoy. Didn't hear a response. I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to keep looking for ways to invite, but so far, no dice. But anyway, for devout Catholics, particularly clergy. Oh, so when I give you this homework, please know this is for me too. That's that was the point of that. Do a diagnostic on yourself. Where do you fall amongst these areas? I mentioned that we kind of broke it down to under 27 different areas. In the middle of that physical report, you can find those tables. Do an honest assessment of yourself, but more importantly, think about those who you know, especially those in your care at your parish or wherever you serve. Where are they in their journey? What do they most need next? How can they be accompanied? And it may be by you, or maybe someone that you can put them in touch with, you can connect them to. And for ministry leaders, and I know there's a bunch of those here too, whether it's you're wearing multiple hats or others in the audience, where do you see the white space? Meaning, what in this research seems particularly ripe for addressing? I think there's a lot of areas, but is there a way in which that we can partner, or you can partner with other Catholic ministries to try to start addressing these things? I just want to make it clear, we don't see this as an academic exercise. We're doing this because we want to know how to address this, and we want to know who else is coming along. Ultimately, we're just trying to help everyone, including ourselves, live out that goal that St. Francis de Sales so eloquently exhorted us to. Be who you are and be that well. Thank you. I was originally hoping that there would be time for questions. I think we might have a minute or two for questions. Are there any quick ones? I'm also happy to talk to anyone if you want to come find me. I'll be at the conference till. Yes? How did you define what's an intentional disciple? Yeah, the question was, how do we define what's an intentional disciple? It's a good question. In fact, I was prepared for that. What we did, when we started, the beginning of the survey was 4 screener questions. We wanted to make sure that at least, before we even asked them any questions, are you in the U.S., are you Christian, are you Catholic, and do you go to Mass at least once a week? That was, if they didn't answer yes to those, they were booted out of the survey. Thanks for their time. Additionally, after we kind of got the data, we cleaned it further, and we removed those for whom faith is not a significant part or limited to a familial or cultural part of who they are. We took out those who never pray outside of Mass, and for those who faith have zero impact on their family, social, interior life. So that we're trying to be, as empathetic as possible in this process. You can't just ask someone, "Are you an intentional disciple?" Because it's, some people will think that they are, and they're, we probably wouldn't define them as one, and others may think that they're not, and out of humility. But so we try to kind of arrive that this way. Yeah. I think we're out of time. Come find me if you have more questions. Thank you.